All right, we just wrapped up the Sunday action for Week 14 of the fantasy football season, our final week of the regular season for most of y'all out there. I'm going to go through, give you my 10 lessons learned for Week 14. What can we expect for the playoffs, the home stretch, and maybe a little bonus lesson at the end for what we learned for the regular season of fantasy football, but let's hop on into it. All right, first up, how about my man Tua Tagovailoa? It's Tua time, baby. After coming back from the injury, he's been a really strong option at quarterback for you guys. Only one game below double digits, had a 14-17 his first two games back, then that 9-point game against the Rams in Week 10, but since then, 4 straight 20-yard performances for Tua, including a nice 23-yarder today. He's been highly efficient for us guys, and the Dolphins offense has really come alive since he's coming back in. We've seen the reemergence of Devon Achane at running back, Tyreek Hill, even Jalen Waddle's coming in, and of course our tight end man, Jonnu Smith, who had the game winner, and the schedule is really favorable for Tua down the stretch. Got the Texans next week, Texans coming off a bye, but not a very good pass defense. San Francisco, they've had their struggles, and Cleveland, the final week of the season. Our guy Tua Tagovailoa could be a guy, if you don't have that elite tier quarterback in your lineup, you need a guy out there that can plug and play. He's been excellent for us. Tua Tagovailoa might be the difference between first place and fourth place in a fantasy league. Give it up for my man Tua. Okay, how about my guy, former Minnesota Viking, current Carolina Panther, Adam Thielen. Thielen balling out now for 2 straight weeks. 3 games since coming back from injury, missed a good chunk of the season. And you know what? A little bit slow start, 8.7 against Kansas City. But the last 2 weeks, 23.9. But hey, Peter, that's just a terrible Tampa Bay defense. A nice 19.2 against the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best secondaries in football. Thielen has really emerged with this revamped Carolina offense with Bryce Young, confidence, cool, collected at quarterback. Thielen's his guy right now. Him, Xavier Leggett's solid. Obviously, they can run the ball with Chuba Hubbard, but look at Thielen. 102 yards this week, 99 yards last week. Didn't have a touchdown this week, but still 11 targets, 9 grabs. Thielen, who we thought was going to have a down week, has really been that reliable safety blanket for Bryce Young. He's getting open. He can still catch the football with the best of them. And look at this remaining schedule for him. Dallas, Arizona, Tampa Bay again, the final 3 weeks of the fantasy season. And even Atlanta in week 18, if your league's crazy enough to play then. What soft matchups for Thielen. I think Thielen could be a guy that you just scooped up on the waiver wire. You plug him in there at your flex position, and he's in for monster weeks. I'm super high on Adam Thielen now. Makes me feel good that he's still balling out there down in Carolina. And look at the Panthers, a team that we thought were going to be the laughingstock of not only the NFL, but the fantasy league. Have an excellent running back, have a really good wide receiver now, and could be the difference in you bringing home a championship. Okay, and now my actual boy, number 18 himself, Justin Jefferson. And Jefferson's gotten a lot of flack, people, some inconsistencies there. Look, we had that 4.7 against Chicago 3 weeks ago, but 16.9 last week, and he breaks out with 32 this week, 7 receptions for a $132 and 2 touchdowns. His first touchdown since week 7 against the Detroit Lions. That's crazy to think about. And it goes to show you what teams have done against Justin Jefferson. But he's still wide receiver 3 on the season in fantasy. Might even be moving up depending, what does Jamar Chase do? What does some other guys do down the stretch here? Monster day for Jefferson. And we've seen this. Look, he's been really solid. Got out to a blistering start. Had 3 20-point games in the first 4 weeks of the season. But it just got a little bit slow there, kind of inconsistent, a 9.8, a 14.1, the 4.7. But the last 2 weeks, getting back to what Justin Jefferson does best. He gets open. Jordan Addison has now emerged. The Vikings offense was rolling today, but JJ, still my guy, not getting the love he deserves. Justin Jefferson, not a bust of a draft pick in the first round, still wide receiver 3. And look, the schedule, not crazy bad either. Has Chicago at home next week coming up. Then he's got the Seattle Seahawks and then the Green Bay Packers at home. So a very reasonable schedule for Jefferson down the stretch. Let's see if JJ makes it up big in the fantasy playoffs for you guys. Okay, how about Jerry Jeudy, the Browns wide receiver, really taking over as that number one wide receiver in Cleveland and looks to be the favorite target of Jameis Winston. Now he's got 3 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks, and he's been spectacular. Obviously, 14.5 against Pittsburgh in that blizzard. Pretty good game. The monster 40 burger he put up against Denver on Monday night, and then a really solid 17.4 and a touchdown to boot this week against Pittsburgh again. Jerry Jeudy has been really, really solid this season. He's only had zero single-digit games since week 8. He's really come on since Jameis Winston has taken over at quarterback, and even a little bit before that, he's emerged as that number one guy. Amari Cooper gets traded. Cedric Tillman maybe gets in a little bit. We have David Njoku who's been banged up, but Jeudy has been awesome for us. Even had a 26-piece against New Orleans in week 11, so he's been the hot hand. 3 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks, and I don't see why there's any reason to think Jeudy and the Browns aren't going to at least keep putting up fantasy points. The most exciting man in football, Jameis Winston, loves our guy Jerry Jeudy. And you know what? He definitely is a game changer, a guy you want to put in your flex each and every week. Jerry Jeudy, here to stay, should be a solid finish to the season for my guy in Cleveland. All right, we just talk about this Buccaneers backfield all we want, but how about Rachaad White again this week? Bucky Irving, a little banged up, goes out again with an injury, and he steps right on in, and this is one of the hottest teams in football right now in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and their run game is the difference right now. Rachaad White, a little bit of a slow start to the season. There were a lot of question marks, just not living up to his potential. Bucky Irving steps in. He's taken over. But guess what? This offense can easily support 2 fantasy running backs. It's kind of a little bit like Detroit. Not quite as good, but still excellent. Since missing week 6 game against the Saints, Rachaad White has just 1 single-digit performance, and that was last week against Carolina with just 8.8, kind of a weird one. 24.9 today against Las Vegas, and it's his involvement in the passing game. Now, it hasn't been quite as much the last 3 weeks, but he's really been involved in the passing game since week 6. 6 targets. 3, 7 now, 1, 1, and 3 the last few weeks. But without Bucky Irving, he has filled in nicely. Rachaad White getting into the end zone, in the air, on the ground. This Buccaneers offense is just really, really suited to run the football. They can support 2 running backs, no problem. So Rachaad White, a guy who we had a ton of question marks through the first 5 games of the season, he's a guy you can start both these running backs in, and if Bucky Irving's going to be banged up, if he's going to miss a game here or there, Rachaad White should have a monster day. And the same goes for Bucky Irving. If Rachaad White gets banged up, Bucky Irving comes right in, and he's going to have a big day. We called Bucky Irving a league winner a couple of weeks ago. Rachaad White could be another guy that has that potential. Now, you maybe drafted White a little bit higher, expecting a little bit more of him, but if you traded for him while he was on the down, you picked him up, he's going to be an excellent flex play for you guys, even a running back too some weeks. Currently RB24 on the season. Love me Rachaad White and this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. One of the best running offenses, especially when it comes to running backs in fantasy football. All right, how about a little bit of love for Calvin Ridley on the Tennessee Titans? Even an ugly offensive day today for the Titans. Ridley still managed to have a nice 12.9 points. Ridley, in his last 7 games, just 2 single-digit performances for the wide receiver, and we got a sprinkling in a couple of 20-point games, consistently in that 12 to 15-point range. And you know what? Calvin Ridley, a guy who really fell a lot in drafts. People were not aggressive in drafting Calvin Ridley because we worried about this Titans offense. And Will Levis really turned it on. Now, today was a kind of a lackluster performance. We would maybe expect a little bit more against the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary, but still, Ridley's been a solid flex play throughout most of the season, and definitely the last 7 games or so. He's been excellent out there. He gets a ton of targets. He's the wide receiver 1 on this team. They have a good balanced rushing attack to go with it. And Will Levis is kind of the key to this whole thing. He's looked decent at quarterback the last few weeks. I know, bad one this week, obviously the blowout last week. But all in all, really solid, really consistent, and a guy that you felt like might be a little scary for you, a little too much volatility, I think is a solid play the rest of the season. It's hard to find guys that can produce consistently for you, especially guys like Calvin Ridley, who is a quality wide receiver just on a bad football team. Maybe the ceiling's a little bit limited with Ridley down the stretch, especially with the emergence of Nick Westbrook-Akine on the other side. But right now, Ridley, a guy I feel really confident with down the stretch, is a solid flex play for everybody. Okay, San Francisco 49ers running backs, maybe literally anybody can just play running back for Kyle Shanahan and his system. Isaac Guerendo, maybe you should just say 49ers running back. Guerendo, the hot fantasy free agent, pick up the waiver wire guy this week. Jordan Mason goes on the IR. Christian McCaffrey goes on the IR. Has a decent week, last week in the blizzard. Gets the touchdown, 8 points. Like, oh, Guerendo, this Guerendo guy could be coming on. Both those running backs go down. Has a beautiful 26.8 for y'all out there. But of course, he did pick up an injury. They're saying it might be a foot sprain. He's going to get an MRI. So really, whoever the 49ers running back is, if they're just plug and play at this point. Now, this 49ers schedule isn't the best coming down the stretch, but when you look at Guerendo, when he gets involved in the game, he filled in that Dallas game, 19.2 points for him. He had over 100, or just under 100 total yards in that game, had a touchdown there. So Guerendo's proved he's a guy that can chunk out yardages. I mean, 9.9 yards a carry against Seattle, 6.7. 4.75 last week against Buffalo, 5.2 this week against the Bears. Now, the Bears don't have a great run defense, but I guess really anybody at running back could be the guy for Kyle Shanahan. So if Isaac Guerendo is out, if this injury is going to sideline him, first of all, the 49ers are completely cursed. It is the year from hell. But go to look at the backup. I think the backup is Taylor. I don't know. He scored a touchdown today too. So whoever the 49ers running back is, that's your guy. Go out and get them. They're going to produce for you. They're going to put up fantasy points. Isaac Guerendo, sometimes, a lot of times, the hot free agent waiver wire guy doesn't live up to the hype and they bust after the potential. Not so fast, not so much this week. Isaac Guerendo showing out for everybody who could have easily gotten you into that playoffs with your waiver wire pickup. All right, how about Bills wide receiver Khalil Shakir? A position that we were kind of worried about. Who's going to be the number one guy in Buffalo? Could it be Kincaid? Is it going to be the rookie Coleman? How about Amari Cooper since he got traded? Nope, it's Khalil Shakir, and he's continued to get better this season. Now, look, Josh Allen might be the fantasy MVP, might be the real MVP, throwing up 55-plus points this week in fantasy. But when you look at a guy like Khalil Shakir, he has been as consistent can be. Just 2 single-digit performances on the season. Now, did miss week 5 against Houston, and he has been lights out. 21.6 this week, 15, 11.8, 11, 19.9, 13.5. And that's without getting touchdowns. This is his first touchdown this week since week 3 against Jacksonville. Khalil Shakir, man, this is a guy that was definitely out there for a lot of people late in drafts, maybe even available on the waiver wire, 13.2, 10.6, nothing crazy out there for him. Even a 10.2 injured, then a 3.9 easily could have been cut by a lot of people. He's still only 87% rostered out there on Sleeper. And he's Josh Allen's go-to guy. Josh Allen's having an MVP season. You want the number one receiver in this kind of offense. It's been a delight to see. And look, Shakir could have even had a bigger game, had a couple of pass interferences drawn by him. Josh Allen trusts him. And I think Allen's got something like a 90% completion percentage when targeting Khalil Shakir. It's been absolutely money for us this year. And you know what? There's no doubt in my mind who the number one receiver is in this offense. And I think Khalil Shakir is going to keep rolling. They got Buffalo's got Detroit next week. That's a favorable matchup. Not the best secondary in the world. And this Bills offense is going to keep scoring points. They need to keep up pace to get the 1 seed in the AFC. They need to keep winning games. They need to keep blowing people out. Josh Allen wants that MVP. I am loving what Khalil Shakir is going to bring to the table for us in the home stretch, in the fantasy playoffs. Great job, Khalil Shakir. Okay, and finally, maybe the big question mark heading into the fantasy football playoffs, Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. Look, Charbonnet has shown flashes in the pan. When he's filled in for an injured Kenneth Walker, he's looked good. Strong 12 points in week 1, 17.9 in week 2, 25 8.7 in week 3 with Kenneth Walker out. But since Walker got inserted back into the lineup, we've seen some real inconsistencies. He's not getting the ball as much. But look at the last 2 weeks, a 12.1 last week against the Jets, and then a monster 38.37 targets today, 59 yards receiving, a $134 and 2 touchdowns on the ground against the Arizona Cardinals. He feels like a much more explosive type back that the Seahawks need to use. The offensive line isn't very good. They can't necessarily run block excellently. And Kenneth Walker's kind of a power downhill nose back, a little bit shifty, a little bit slashy, but Charbonnet just seems to add so much more to this run game as a team. I mean, they're using him on jet sweeps to get him into the end zone. The Seahawks are humming right now as a team. Now, the Seahawks are saying that they think Walker avoided long-term injury. They expect him back if he doesn't set another setback next week. But Kenneth Walker seems to always be getting banged up. He seems to always be getting hurt. I'm optimistic here, cautiously optimistic, that Charbonnet could be a guy that you've held on to on your bench for a good chunk of the season. Despite the inconsistencies, he's going to be a great plug and play for you because I think the Seattle Seahawks offense is starting to figure it out. Their 2 best performances were the last 2 weeks. They've been scoring the ball, they've been moving the ball, and it's coincidentally the best 2 games we've seen out of Charbonnet lately. And when you go back to early in the season when the Seahawks were having a lot of success, it was Charbonnet doing the chunk of it. So as much as I love my man Kenneth Walker, as much as I love K9, I think Charbonnet is the way to go with Seattle. And finally, maybe the most important lesson of the fantasy football season that we have learned: NFL coaches do not care about us, and they do not care about fantasy football. When we need a guy to get our big performances, coaches do not care. They will not give him the ball. They will put in the 3rd string fullback that nobody has ever heard of to go ahead and poach your touchdown. Every single year, it consistently and always happens. Coaches don't care. They break our hearts each and every week, but sometimes they do care. Sometimes they take care of us, get their ball to our guys, but all in all, they're not reliable. They hate us, I think. In fact, if you ask them, they probably hate us. They hate fantasy. They hate sports gambling. But that's going to do it for us this week. Let me know down in the comments below, who are your big-time performers? What are the lessons you learned? Who can we rely on? Who is out for the fantasy playoffs? And guess what? If you didn't make the playoffs, go ahead, make sure you win that toilet bowl, ruin somebody else's season. Hey, sometimes they're prizes, and don't finish in last place. You don't want to get that punishment if your league has a punishment. Again, check out the links down below. We got all the daily fantasy content you guys could ever need. Drop a quick like on this video, subscribe to the channel. All the videos, like I said, waiver wire videos, who to target in the waivers. This is a big week. Fantasy playoffs, got to get it done. Must starts at quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end for every single matchup. Your must start defenses, my kicker ranking in tiers. We got it all for you guys. Again, like, subscribe, and share. I'll see y'all tomorrow.